Chapter 9 of The Adventures of a Nature Guide by Enos Mills. This Librivox recording is in the public domain. Lightning and Thunder. I took shelter from a thunderstorm in a prospector's cabin far up a mountain slope. Jerry Sullivan and I stood in the open door, watching the breaking clouds over us and the drifting clouds in the canyons below, when out of an almost clear sky came a bolt of lightning. It struck an aged fir tree within 60 feet of the cabin and blew it as completely to fragments as though dynamited from top to bottom. Splinters and chunks of wood were showered around us. A shattered stump 2 feet in diameter and not more than a foot high was all that remained of the 80-foot fir. Booming and broken echoes of the crash resounded among the canyons. To camouflage my feelings, I turned to Sullivan and in a matter-of-fact manner asked, "Why is it that lightning never strikes twice in the same place?" Like lightning came the reply, "It don't need to." But lightning does strike twice, and even repeatedly in the same place. Within 1 mile of my mountain home was a western yellow pine that during 30 years was struck 14 times. It was rapped 3 times in a single season and twice during one storm, and it is likely that it was hit a number of times during its earlier years. A scar nearly a century old just above the roots of the tree showed that one lightning stroke had burst out a chunk of wood several feet long. None of these strokes did serious damage. Many trees appear to be good conductors and rarely is one killed. This pine, when finally killed by beetles, was probably more than 300 years old. Another pine, less than 25 feet from this one and nearly as large, was struck 3 times while its neighbor received 14 strokes. I have dissected trees in various parts of the country and occasionally found one which bore unmistakable evidences of having been struck a number of times. John Muir told me that the head of a sequoia tree is sometimes struck repeatedly. He had seen living trees struck and had examined the lightning-scarred tops of fallen dead ones. It is a common belief that lightning does not strike twice in the same place, but a colored man was convicted by appearances. "That tree has been struck 3 times by lightning, boss," said Sam. "Impossible, Sam. Lightning never strikes twice in the same place, you know." "Well, say, boss, the thing that struck it yesterday bears a striking resemblance to what struck it before." On scores of occasions during my years of camping over North America, lightning appeared to see how close to me it could strike without hitting me. I once held the common and preconceived notion that there were some species of trees that lightning was pretty certain to strike, and other species which it never struck. But lightning, more than any other natural agency that I know, has a speedy and 100% efficient way of eradicating superstitions concerning itself. The only thing certain about lightning is that there is nothing certain about it. It cannot be anticipated. It never encourages one to predict where it will strike next. Its strategy is of a spectacular order, and its attacks are ever a successful surprise. Lightning strikes every known species of tree. It not only strikes trees that stand on summits, but it comes down to those that lead lowly lives in canyons. There are conditions, however, which cause a tree to be frequently struck. A tall tree of any species is more likely to be rapped on the head than its contemporary of conventional height. A tree on a hilltop, being closer to the electrical field, is more likely to be struck than the tree in a ravine. A lone tree much more likely than one in a grove. In fact, the tree in a position to intercept most electrical discharges and to offer these discharges the best local conductor into the earth is the one most likely to be struck. In this connection, it is said that trees rich in starch are much more frequently struck than those rich in rosin. That is, an elm or poplar is more likely to be hit than a pine or a spruce. But often it appears to be the tree with good current transmission that is struck. Trees deeply rooted are more frequently struck than shallow-rooted ones. If a tree is shallow-rooted or is rooted among dry rocks, it is something of an insulator or poor conductor. There is little likelihood of its being used by a lightning bolt in reaching the earth. A green tree, rooted in a moist place or among mineralized rocks, is an excellent conductor and offers shelter of first rank for those of the Suicide Club. The old pine, struck 14 times, was rooted in an outcrop of iron core, and a number of its roots penetrated the moist soil to a nearby brook. Years ago, while making a nature address, I was asked the question, "Does lightning ever strike a mulberry tree?" I did not know, and answered another question which was asked at the same instant, ignored the mulberry tree, and went on talking. At the next pause, however, the lady repeated her question in these words, "If I take refuge beneath a mulberry tree during a thunderstorm, will I be safe?" Being young, wise, and impertinent, I could not miss the opportunity to say, "Madam, it all depends upon the kind of life you're leading." Many believe that it is most dangerous to take refuge beneath a tree during a storm, especially under a conspicuously placed tree. But as a matter of fact, the majority of people struck by lightning are struck in the open fields. But this risk is absurdly small. Other risks, not lightning, seriously concern life insurance companies. There is an old proverb which is supposed to contain wisdom for those outdoors during a storm. It says, "Avoid the oak, flee from the spruce, seek the beech." This advice is obsolete. The beech receives proportionately as many raps as any other species. In the nature of things, it should be the best conductor of the three species named. The incomplete European records concerning lightning show that members of the poplar family, aspen, and cottonwood are the species more frequently struck in that part of the world. It is quite probable that an investigation would show that these trees stand in the most inviting places, or in soil that renders them an easy or even alluring conductor for lightning in its zigzag journeys from sky into earth. The most frequently struck species of trees in any locality is probably the species most numerous or in the most exposed places, or a combination of local conditions make it the superior conductor. In Western Africa is a species more frequently struck than all the other local trees. This the natives speak of as being hated by lightning. In contrast to this expression is one which I have heard the cowboys use. In certain small zones of Arizona and New Mexico, the lightning strikes with remarkable frequency, and the prevailing species struck is loved by lightning. So far as I have noticed, the particular species of tree most likely to be badly smashed or blown to pieces by lightning is the fir. I cannot account for this unless it be due to a peculiar combination: much moisture, which is a good conductor for lightning, and much pitch and rosin, which are supposed to be almost non-conductors. At any rate, I have seen numbers of fir trees from 40 to 100 feet high that were cut down to the roots by a single stroke. Over an extensive area on Mount Meeker, Colorado, Balsam fir is the species which shows the most lightning wounds, with limber pine second in number. Yet the dominant species in this zone, which lies between the altitudes of 9,000 and 11,000 feet, is the Engelmann spruce. The spruce is several times as numerous as the other two species combined, and in most areas is the taller. It is possible that it is struck with equal frequency, but rarely receives wounds that record the experience. In the fir, a slit or burst rent through the bark down one side of the tree was the lightning's mark. This is the common lightning sign. I have always considered storms especially good exhibitions, and during camping trips often sought a commanding place to watch one. From the rim of a canyon, the top of a towering cliff, and wind-swept treetops, I have watched rain, hurrying clouds, and illuminating lightning. These spectacular displays, with the rumbling roar aroused and repeated by the mountains, were among the most stirring contributions to my outings. Each experience was an adventure, and never was a storm in any way dull. Sometimes lightning is a high explosive. One of the many surprises which it gave me happened near my camp in Arizona. The bolt struck and wrecked the roots of the tree like a high explosive shell, but blowing the trunk and top uninjured into the air. Lightning another time struck the side of a tree like a projectile and tore out a chunk of wood, then completely wrecked a tree several yards beyond. A lodge pole pine about 60 feet high and without a limb for 40 feet was struck about 12 feet above the earth and cut off as though by a shell. Neither the stump below nor the trunk or top showed any trace of the bolt. Another time lightning struck the top of a tree and ran down the trunk into the earth, where it apparently came in contact with the roots of another tree standing several yards off. Both trees were blown into the air together with the rocks in which their roots were entangled. Twice I have known bolts to wreck entire clumps of trees. One of these contained 9 and the other 5 trees. Another bolt near my camp in southern Colorado blew all the leaves off a cottonwood clump without any other visible injury. Neither the wood in lightning-struck trees nor the chunks of exploded ones, as a rule, show signs of heat or fire injury. Limbs of a lightning-struck oak in southern Colorado, however, were shattered and frayed out so that they appeared more like shredded hemp than anything else. On examining a tree that I saw struck, there were 2 parallel lines of rupture grooves about 4 inches apart down the trunk. Either the bolt had divided before striking the tree, or else 2 bolts had struck the tree at about the same spot and instant. Apparently, a bolt striking a treetop follows down the grain of the wood, follows even the intensive twists of a tree from the top where it strikes to the earth. In some trees this twist of grain was so spiral that the bolt passed 3 times around the tree trunk in its descent to the earth. Usually the bolt plows a tiny U-shaped groove through the bark without otherwise injuring the tree. The lightning-struck tree, unless shattered to pieces, usually survives, but the openings which the lightning makes through the bark allow the entrance of insect enemies, which frequently are detrimental. There is not a complete agreement as to just what produces this wrecking explosiveness of lightning strokes. It is generally believed that the explosion is due to the superheated steam in the tree trunk, but in most cases the injuries are slight and the tree lives on. I doubt if more than 1% of the lightning-struck trees are set on fire. Of course, it is the dead tree that is most inflammable. but many times lightning fires the trash accumulated against the base of a green one. Lightning struck a green spruce on a slope visible from my camp. In a few minutes a column of smoke enveloped the tree. Then rain poured down. Half an hour later I found that a square yard of trash and spruce needles at the foot of the tree had been fired before the rain drowned the fire. One evening in the Mesa Verde National Park, lightning struck a dead pine on a canyon rim opposite where I was camping. There was no sign of fire at the time. A steady rainfall continued for 3 or 4 hours after the stroke, but about midnight the treetop burned off and fell with a crash. I leaped up to see sparks and chunks of fire bounding down the side of the canyon, while the tall snag held up a flaming torch. May it not be that lightning, by starting a woods fire, brought fire to our primitive ancestors, if not to all tribes, at least to many of them. The ancients are said to have had many excellent legends concerning lightning. One of the most appealing and poetic that I have heard says that originally all the river channels of the earth were plowed by lightning. Lightning is a common accompaniment of summer rains, and repeated lightning strokes may be the chief feature of a summer storm. Then again there may be a rain without lightning or thunder being seen or heard. Lightning is occasionally noticed during early spring and late autumn, and on rare occasions it makes startling appearances during winter storms. Lightning seems to strike more frequently in the plains and valleys than in the mountains. During 305 climbs to the top of Long's Peak, I knew of lightning striking the summits but twice. Both bolts struck in precisely the same spot, and in both cases the storm clouds were high above the summit. Most rainstorms in high mountains are on the slopes, while the peaks and high plateaus tower above in the sunshine. Sometimes the summit points are in the midst of the storm, but being in and not beneath the storm, they are therefore less frequently struck than the slopes or the lowlands. There may be exceptions in peaks of moderate height or those highly mineralized, but when storms cover the mountains, the summits of peaks rarely are below, in the range of, thunderbolts. Peaks in the upper edge of the storm cloud are frequently enveloped in what may be called an invisible zone of electricity. This may zizz, zizz, and crackle around rock points and give a tingle to the hair and fingertips, but there is no striking in this zone. Here the fluid may concentrate and descend upon lesser heights. Though these so-called electrical storms are common on mountain peaks, I have not heard of their being fatal or even serious, but as Muir says, they often cause every hair on one's head to stand up like an enthusiastic congregation and sing. Lightning, however, is said to assail frequently the summit of Little Mount Ararat, Asia, and numbers of rocks on the top are shattered, bored through, and in places fused to glass by lightning strokes. Lightning sometimes strikes a gravelly or sandy place and may penetrate for 20 feet or more, leaving a tiny ragged-edged hole an inch or less in diameter. Around the edge of this, the sand and stone are fused into glass or near glass. Sometimes a bolt penetrates solid rock and makes a glassy hole, but more often when rock is struck, the bolt seems to explode as though resisted. It was Benjamin Franklin who first thought to turn electrical energy into constructive work, and also it was he who brought forward the lightning rod plan as a means of protecting buildings from lightning damage. In May 1904, I happened to be on Specimen Mountain, about 13,000 feet above the sea, during the gathering and the continuance of a storm which deluged and greatly damaged the lowlands of northern Colorado. There were frequent lightning strokes. The air was surcharged with juice. This twitched and contracted my muscles and pulled my hair with an accompaniment of snapping, crackling, buzzing, and humming. The following day, while the storm was at its wildest in the lowlands, I was descending the mountains between 11 and 9,000 feet. Much of the time I was in the broken storm cloud, and as I wrote in my notebook, for 2 hours the crash and roll of thunder was incessant. I counted 23 times that the lightning struck rocks, but I did not see it strike a tree. Those who have not been in a violent thunderstorm in rugged high mountains perhaps cannot appreciate the remark of an old mountain guide who said, "The best thunders are always saved for the mountains." The mountain walls, cliffs, and long receding slopes break, repeat, prolong, and compound the thunders into a deep-toned orchestra. I have heard of people having their shoes burst off by a lightning bolt without their receiving serious injury. In Cripple Creek I saw a man at a windlass in an open space slightly injured by a lightning bolt which burst shoe soles and uppers completely apart and tore off most of his clothing. A dry, dead tree or limb is an extremely poor conductor, but during a rain, when covered with a film of water, these are converted into excellent conductors. Apparently, a lightning bolt will not leave a good conductor for a poor one. While working in a tunnel extending nearly 1,000 feet into a mountainside, lightning struck the water pipe outside and followed this into the tunnel, giving me a shake-up. All the way through the tunnel, the pipe was in contact with the dry rocks, but my foot resting on the pipe was covered with a water-soaked shoe. The records of the Agricultural Department indicate that lightning strikes far more frequently through the east than through the west, Illinois and Florida being most frequently struck. Yet in these states, death and damage from lightning are almost negligible. It is extremely rare for a big wild animal to be struck by lightning, yet the woods and the mountains are peopled with moose, deer, elk, bear, and mountain sheep. Birds and squirrels, however, with roosts and nests in the treetops, and woodpeckers with homes in tree trunks, are occasionally killed. Once I was out for a few days with a burro, Satan, who was totally depraved. He wanted to leave undone everything he was asked to do. In all his dreams a self-starter had not occurred to him. Once in motion he had but one speed, always on low. I found myself wondering if lightning had any affinity for burros. Satan was supposed to be the burden bearer of the expedition, yet under a psychological test or in the field test his usefulness should have been rated low, and I personally told him that he was wholly non-essential to this so-called vacation trip and to the happiness of the world as well. A vigorous expenditure of energy and expletive did not get us anywhere. One day we turned into camp during a downpour of rain. We asked Satan to move a few yards further that we might unpack under the shelter of a tree. But with feet outbraced at every corner, two storms at once failed to move him. He pretended to go to sleep while we removed our bedding in the rain. Just as the last of the pack was removed, two terrific lightning bolts struck close by. These resounding crashes instantly put life and fear into Satan. When a smashed treetop fell near him, he rose on his hind legs and put his arms affectionately around me, hitting me over the eye with one shod hoof. I tolerated this demonstration simply because, except for his firmness, we would have been in the shelter of the tree which the lightning had hit on the head. Once I watched two black and broken cloud strata that were piled against the horizon with a misty peak of summit cloud 1,000 feet or more up in the sky. From this cloud peak there burst out together 3 golden rivers of lightning. These separated, ran vertically down the sky several thousand feet, and united in the lower cloud stratum. A number of times in the mountains I have seen shafts, zigzag flashes, and sinuous golden lightning burst out of an absolutely clear blue sky and descend to the earth. I have also seen trees struck by what appeared to be a golden ball of lightning, which rolled into the tree horizontally. On one occasion a globe was followed by a number of other golden globes, which traveled slowly over the same course. Once near camp I saw both golden globes and golden rivers of lightning playing liquid fire over high mountains against the clear stars of night. These spectacular fireworks were accompanied with rumbling and crashing as though a violent thunderstorm was in progress. Yet nowhere in the sky or on the horizon was there a cloud in sight. The only possible explanation I could make of this exhibition was that beyond and below the high mountain horizon, and not many miles off, a storm was in progress. End of chapter 9.